Good morning. Greetings from the Institute of Global Professional IGP Bangladesh. Greetings from the Institute of Global Professional IGP Bangladesh. Thank you all for joining us and staying with us to the end. Honorable Knowledge Seeker, today I am your host for the morning. My name is Badun Dash. I am from Bangladesh. Dear Knowledge Seeker, I am proud to be associated with IGP as a global member. IGP is a social and ISO certified international training institute. In 3 years, we already serve 3 million plus knowledge seekers from 100 plus countries. IGP is internationally recognized and globally accredited. We are connected to more than 250 plus professions and 4,500 plus organizations. Institute of Global Professional (IGP) is a training faculty for skill development which was founded in 2020 and is generating competent candidates to meet demand in the global labor market by providing professional qualifications. The Institute of Global Professional is an education institute that provides social work globally recognized and reputable. We serve student and community resource providing holistic social work and education. We believe that it's not effective to increase one skill just by according formal education. So we provide effective training and consultation to generate professional generation all over the world. We distribute our services locally, nationally, and internationally to student, job seeker, job holder, and also for learner to respective campus location and distance learning platform. We are an occupational and dependable institute. IGP is one of the famous online institutes from all over the world. Our vision is education is not a business product, it's a part of our human rights. Based on our vision, we are trying to reach all corners of the world for free webinars, seminar courses, our quiz competition, mentoring, and counseling, etc. On the other side, we are also trying to serve more than 100 premium service for free like create own portfolio website, resume builder, cover letter, motivation letter, and all knowledge platform for gathering general knowledge which can upgrade all day. Kids learning game, website free course, convert sites, and many more. We help to empower you to learn to meet their expectation and dream and become highly skilled people. We implement several training programs, webinar and offline online courses for youth and learners by professional trainer, speaker, and coaches. Our sessions are conducted by globally renowned professionals to develop our kind of youth and to promote the education of their abilities and personalities. To ensure excellent and in-depth instruction, we are with qualified trainer, speaker, and instructor. We extended free services to more than 3 million knowledge seekers in last 3 years. We have affiliation with universities and organizations in 70 different countries. Virtual signing with many colleges and organizations have been accomplished. We are working to create a legendary generation of future scholars and citizens who will be accountable. We are constantly prepared to assist all knowledge seekers with valuable service. Spreading knowledge is crucial for the Institute of Global Professionals. We believe that knowledge is love and light ambition. So we try to understand the need of today's generation and will serve them with good research and practice methods. We must have a genuine concern for the learner we represent. More diversity, growth, and innovation are required to lead a session with professionalism, passion, and integrity. IGP members are committed to offering effective best quality service and continual improvement so that individuals who seek information can improve their skill level and value. Before we move to the next, let me remind don't forget to share, tag, and mention your friend in the comment box. Your support is very valuable for us. Thank you. Moving to the next, with your continuous support, we already completed 1,383 webinars successfully. Wow. Before we move to the next, let me remind don't forget to share, tag, and mention your friend in the comment box. Your support is very valuable for us. Thank you. Moving to the next, with your continuous support, we already completed 1,383 webinars successfully. Wow. At present, we are going to start our 1,384 webinar, which name is IELTS Speaking Guides and Tips to Achieve Target Score. And today, our speaker ma'am name is Sulamita Baktona. She is from Philippines. Before I hand over the stage to our speaker ma'am, I also share a very little bit about her. PUB Education, IELTS trainer, IELTS speaker mock test certificated score 9, experience in IELTS ESL teaching. Now, very important moment for me to invite our speaker to IGP with her presentation. Now, very important moment for me to invite our speaker to IGP with her presentation. Hello, ma'am. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. How are you?
Ma'am, please present your presentation.
Okay. hmm All right. Is it shown?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, the stage is yours. You can start your presentation now.
Okay, thank you so much, Miss, for the introduction. Okay, so once again, my name is Shulamite Bagtuna, and I am from the Philippines. So, thank you so much for being here. My topic today is about guides and tips to achieve target score. So, in my previous presentation, we already talked about the basic information about IELTS. So now let's move on. What are the guides or the tips that you needed for you to have your target score? Okay, so for the introduction, okay, here again, IELTS means International English Language Testing System. So these are usually given to students or aspirants who are non-native speakers. Okay, so what's the objective of this test? It is to assess the English language proficiency on non-native English speakers. Okay, so it is. I mean, it has two types. We have the IELTS academic test. So this is usually for the students or students who's going to take masters or PhD outside their country or also inside as long as it requires this test. Okay, and sorry. The other one is for IELTS general training. So these are for um, people who's going to move to another country for good, or also for the workers. Okay, so it focuses mainly on assessing a person's proficiency, confidence, and comfort when communicating in English in daily situations. Okay, so what's the very first thing that you need to remember when you are preparing for IELTS test? Okay, first, you have to understand the format of the test. Okay, so IELTS speaking test has three parts. The first one, or what we call as part one, is a brief introduction and warm up conversation. So, in this part, it's like a casual conversation between you and the examiner because most of the questions are just like personal or just about you, yourself, your hobbies, everyday life, those ones, and something else. Okay. So usually this one is like 4 to 5 minutes for the whole part one. And you can give like 2 to 4 sentences answer depending on how long each of these sentences are. Okay. For the second one, or what we call as part two, this is the okay, this is the time that you are going to tell a story about a specific topic that was given to you or that will be given to you by the examiner. Okay, so you don't know exactly what topic are they going to give you, so you have to prepare the topics in advance. Okay, you will be speaking for 1 to 2 minutes, but it would be better if you're going to speak for 2 minutes so that your examiner will have enough answer to evaluate. Sometimes they say it's better to be overtime than under time. Okay, it's not a problem if you're overtime. That's okay. What's important is that you were able to complete your story. Okay, because even if you're overtime, if the story that you were able to provide answered all the sub questions, then that's good. But if you're over time and your answer was, incomplete, or you did not answer the question really, it was irrelevant, then that would still affect your score. Okay. The third one is the third one is where you're going to share your opinion. This is also the part wherein you're going to give longer answer than the part one, because in this one you have to give like 5 to 10 sentences per question. Okay, you have to explain, give an example. You can also share your opinions, arguments, everything. Okay, just make sure that you have to stick to the topic, and of course you really have to explain what they're asking you, and stick to the main idea that you have given. Okay, so in part three, the topic, the answers that you're going to give is not about your answer in part two. There are a lot of students getting confused here because they thought that the answer that they're going to give is connected to the story that they have given. But no, not really. Part three is a general question. It is about the society and the world, so it's not connected to your answer in part two, but it is related to the question in part two. Okay. All right. Moving on, we have here possible questions or sample questions of the test. Okay. So this topic is actually from January to May. Okay. For the part one, if you notice, the questions are very basic. Okay, they might ask, like, do you like singing? Why? So you don't need to explain a lot here. You can just answer and then give a reason. But if you think that your answer is very short, you can also give an example. Like you can say, well, honestly, I am not the kind of person who loves singing for the reason that I am blah, 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 like that, right? Okay. When do you do puzzles? During your trip or when you feel bored? Okay. If you are the kind of person who don't like puzzles, that's fine. You can tell the examiner honestly that you're that kind of person, right? You don't need to sugarcoat or you don't need to fake your answer. Just be natural. It doesn't need to be I mean, you don't need to really give an answer that is not true just to impress the examiner. No, it doesn't work like that. Okay. So another one, do most people prefer public transportation in your country? Does anyone in your family have the same name as you? What did you do in the morning when you were little and why? And do you want to learn how to cook well? So see, if you notice, the questions really are quite personal, right? And yes, you have to give your answer here. It doesn't need to be explained very well because again, in part one, it can be 2 to 4 sentences. Okay, moving on for the part two. So again, this is the individual long term. You're going to tell a story about the topic. All right. Example is describe a place you visited where the air was polluted. Okay. So you are expected to tell a story about the place that you will be describing. Another is describe your favorite place in your house where you can relax. So if you say that it's your bedroom, well, you are expected to tell a lot about your bedroom. Okay. Describe a website you often visit. All right. So once you describe the website, you also have to introduce what kind of website is that. I notice a lot of students are saying the name of the website, it's even in foreign word. They explain why they like the website, but they never tell what kind of website is that. Like, is it a shopping website, a video sharing website, like that? Because remember, not all examiners really know the website. I mean, all the websites, or even if they do, you really have to give an introduction about that. Because what if in the future, when you go to other countries and you are going to tell something about a website, and that listener doesn't know what website is that, are you just going to keep on talking now? Of course, you have to tell them what is that. Okay. Describe a piece of technology you own that you feel is difficult to use. This is also quite confusing to others because I noticed that a lot of people are giving their answers but forgot some of the words mentioned. Like, yes, they describe a piece of technology that's very difficult to use, but they forgot the word you own. Okay, because they're describing something that they don't own, like that. And then later on, I'm gonna tell them that, the question is talking about a piece of technology that you own, but it looks like you don't own what you're talking about. Okay, and then they will say, oh, I didn't notice that, I overlook it. Yes, in your test, you have to be very careful in reading the question, okay? Once you miss 1 or 2 questions in the cue card, that would actually affect your preparation as well as your answer. Okay, lastly, describe an interesting old person you met. Yes, in IELTS is speaking questions. There are a lot of questions that would ask you about someone that you know. Like, describe someone that you met who is a stranger somewhere, or you're going to describe your friend, or describe someone who taught you a skill, describe an old person. So you really have to prepare describing people. Okay. So these are just some of the questions in part two. Honestly, there are really a lot, as you've seen in the list. These are just some. Okay. How about the sample questions for part three? Well, the part three, in some cases, or in most cases, really, the examiner can generate their own questions. Okay. And it really happened. All right. These are just examples of what kind of questions they're going to ask. Okay, the first one, do you think people are more selfish or self centered now than in the past? So you have to explain your answer. If you say yes, if you say no, it doesn't matter. What's important is that your explanation should really be about your main answer. So if you say yes, your explanation should really be talking why it's a yes. Okay. And the first and the foremost, of course, you really have to know first the difference of of selfish and self-centered. Okay. Another one, what do you think of celebrity endorsements in advertising? Okay. Do you think people are born with time management skills or they can develop them? So it's up to you what you're going to say. Okay. What's important is that your opinion is very clear to be understood by your listener or your examiner, especially for the pronunciation, of course. Every vocabulary mentioned should be clearly pronounced. Okay, so if you notice in part three, they're all opinionated. Like some people might say yes, some people might say no, right? Some people might give different ideas or opinions about this, but it doesn't matter really, as I have mentioned. Okay, all right, and even if your examiner, I mean, even if your answer is not the same with what the examiner is thinking, that's fine. It does not affect your score. Okay, so what's important is that you explain that one very well. Okay, so what is the objectives of the IELTS speaking test? During the test, the examiner will assess your ability to, number one, communicate effectively in English. How well can you give your opinions? All right. How well can you communicate in English? Is it easily understood? Okay. Are there times that the words are not understood very well? Do you speak so fast or so slow? How was it? Something like that. Okay. Do you use appropriate vocabulary and grammar? Okay, we know there are a lot of vocabularies in English that might have the same meaning, but it might be used in a different way, right? Okay. Um, they also want to check how well you organize your ideas coherently. Okay, that's the reason why in part two they are giving you 1 minute to prepare for you to organize your thoughts. Because in telling your story, you have to make sure that it is clearly imagined, right? Like, do you think your story is imaginable, or like if I am the listener, can I picture what you're talking about? Because if it's very hard to imagine, then that means that this story was not organized very well, right? Okay. They will also check your ability to speak fluently and with good pronunciation. Yeah, we have mentioned that. Okay. Also, on how you respond appropriately to the questions that they ask you. Okay. Like when they ask you something about a cat, is your answer really about the cat or you're talking about a dog? Just like that. Okay. Um, Use a range of language functions such as giving opinions, agreeing, disagreeing, speculating, and so on. So this is already in part three. Some people say the part three is really the hardest because you have to explain a lot and defend your answer. And the examiner will keep on asking why or how, or sometimes they keep on generating questions from your answers. You really have to stand what you say, okay? All right. Next one. Okay, you have to practice speaking in English. Well, of course, this is really very basic in IELTS preparation because without the practice, your confidence is also affected, and of course everything, your score, your performance, like that. Okay, so regular practice is essential for improving your speaking skills. You can practice speaking with a friend or family member or record yourself speaking and listen to it to identify areas where you need to improve. So for the speaking partner, it can be anyone, honestly. It can be a teacher, a coach, okay, your friend, your parents, all right, or yeah, you can record yourself to check. However, sometimes it's really better if you have to talk to people in English as well. Okay, and if you assess yourself and you think that you still need a lot of preparation or practice, it would be better to practice like 6 months to 1 year before your IELTS test. However, if you think that you belong to the advanced level, then I guess weeks or a month would be fine, depending on your level, of course. Okay. Next one, you have to expand your vocabulary because having a good vocabulary will help you express your ideas more effectively. Try to learn new words and phrases and use them. Okay. During your test. All right. So yes, of course, vocabulary is one of the most important thing because when we are answering the questions, we have to make sure that we know what we're saying. Like we should not be saying a lot of ums and ums because you're trying to remember what word to use, right? Okay. However, I suggest that if you are trying to learn new words, you have to use them again and again before the exam comes, okay? Um, we notice a lot of students are actually using a lot of high level words thinking that they might get higher score. But apparently, it turned out that they get a lower score because they use the high level words in a wrong place, in a wrong way, and they even tend to mispronounce it. Why? Because they just learn it and they did not even learn how to use it properly in a sentence. As we have mentioned earlier, there are many words in English that have the same meaning, but they have to be used in a different way. Okay? Like example, as I have mentioned before in my previous presentation, okay, someone said like, I breathe fresh oxygen when I am in my hometown. So, yes, that's correct. We breathe oxygen, but it is more appropriate if you're going to use the word fresh air, right? Okay, though the word oxygen might be higher level, but it's not appropriate to say it in that sentence, right? Okay, so yes, again, if you're learning new vocabularies, learn also to use them again and again, okay? Until you master how to use it, how to pronounce it, and how to apply it in different sentences. Okay, just a moment. All right, I'm sorry for that. Okay, moving on. Okay, this is also a very basic guide. Okay, it says here speak fluently. Okay, so fluency is an important aspect of the speaking test. Well, in any language, really, fluency is very important. Okay, so you should try to avoid long pauses, hesitations, and repetition. Practice speaking at a moderate pace and use fillers such as and when you need time to think, but it should be minimal, okay? Yes, because if it's already too much and that would already affect your fluency and coherence. But if it's minimal, that's fine, okay? Honestly, there are students who even got 9 even if they use the words and That's fine. Because if you're not using this, it sounds like your answer is memorized. We don't like that to happen, um it's not natural not to say this one, right? Remember, when we answer questions from friends or anyone, we sometimes also say and even if we're already fluent. That's really natural. However, again, if it's too much, it's not good. Okay. So, what are the other words that you can use? You can also use however, moreover, therefore, like that. These are the possible alternatives. Okay. So, when we say fluency, it affects your, I mean, it talks about your speed, okay? It talks about your speed, um, pauses, and so on, okay? All right. So, aside from however, moreover, and therefore, there are other words that you may use, such as this one, okay? First, second, I noticed that, then, next. In other words, in addition, I must admit, well, I believe. Okay, this one on the last part, well, I believe, this is also a good alternative for the word I think. I don't know if you notice in some people, they always use the word I think. And it's really true. And they actually do it subconsciously. Like they didn't know that they're saying a lot of I think many times. Okay. So yeah, it's okay to use the word I think, but once or twice is enough. But more than that during your whole exam is not already good. So yes, you can use the word well or I believe. Okay. Like if they ask you, can you tell me about your favorite music? And then you said, um, I think that is pop music. Well, you can also say, well, I believe that should be a pop music or that must be pop music, mainly because blah, 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 right? Or you can also say, personally, I am into pop music, right? Okay. Next one, all right, use grammar correctly. Okay, yes, grammar is really very important in any language again. Okay, because using a wrong grammar might affect the meaning of your answer. Okay, so grammar is important, but it's not the only thing that matters. Try to use a variety of grammatical structures correctly and don't be afraid to make mistakes. However, avoid making basic grammatical errors that can affect your scores. Okay, so if you notice, it says there, it's okay. Do not be afraid to make mistakes, but you have to avoid making basic grammar errors. What are those basic grammar errors? So, this one are the wrong grammar that would change the meaning of your answer. Okay? Like example, the word is and are, he and she, they, I, like that. Once you interchange those, it will change the meaning of what you're saying, right? Or it might even confuse your listener. So those are the basic grammar errors. Okay. You don't need to use complicated sentence structures to get a high score in the IELTS speaking test. Yes, really. Okay, in fact, using simple sentence structures correctly is better than using complicated ones incorrectly. Stick to subject, verb, object, sentence structures and use conjunctions to connect ideas. Okay. While simple sentence structures are sufficient, using a variety of sentence structures can help you show a higher level of English proficiency. Use complex sentences, compound sentences, and even simple sentences with modifiers to convey more complex ideas. Okay, what does this mean? Well, maybe you heard before that they say if you're going to use more complicated sentences, you will get higher score. Well, that's true. Okay, it can be as long as your complicated sentence is really very clear to understand as well, and the construction of the words, or the way the words were arranged, are really clear. Okay. However, we know that's not easy, right? Especially if you're already on the spot. Okay. There are also a lot of students who got very high score without using complicated sentences because that's not what they're checking. What they're checking is how well can you convey your ideas. Let's have an example. Okay, so the complicated sentence here is that not only does the room have large windows that allow ample natural light to pour in, but they also offer an aesthetically pleasing view of the meticulously maintained garden that I have personally tended to, adding a touch of tranquility and natural beauty to the space. Okay, so if you notice, it looks like you're a writer. Okay, it looks like you need to be a writer or an advanced level of English speaker to have this kind of sentence. Though it's really good, right? Now you don't need to mention that way. You can say something like the room has large windows. So that's the simple sentence, right? The room has large windows. But you can add more by using connector, the word that, okay? The room has large windows that let in a lot of natural light and provide a nice view and so on, right? Okay. So it's simpler, but of course it's for general audience, right? Okay. Why? In IELTS speaking, they are going to check how well can you explain to people when you go to other countries. And when you speak to them, you don't do it this way. You don't give a complicated sentence when you talk to your professor or workmates when you go to other places, right? Not really that. Okay. So next one, develop your opinions. Okay. This really matters because in part 2 and part 3 you are going to explain a lot, right? And before we're going to say something, we really have to develop what we're going to say. Okay, so practice is expressing your opinion on various topics. This will help you become more comfortable and confident in stating your position. Okay, If you did not develop your opinion while answering, there's a tendency that your answer will be messed up, not organized, and of course, very hard to understand. Okay? So before you start answering, you have to make sure that you already know what to say. You already have a main idea that you're going to explain. That might be challenging, but you can pause for a few seconds before answering, especially in part three. You don't need to answer immediately as fast as you can. No, not really. Once they ask you the question in part three, you can take a moment to pause, like 1 to 2 seconds. Or maybe you can use words to buy time while thinking of an idea, okay? For example, if they ask you, could you tell me the most popular application in your country? And you can say something like, oh, well, in my observation, I noticed that a lot of people are using the app called blah, 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 right? So if you notice, while I was thinking of an answer, I was saying, in my observation, I noticed that a lot of young people or a lot of people, right? Okay, so we call those ones as, buying time, okay? Like sentence starters to buy time. Okay. Use specific examples. Okay. So once you give your main idea, like example, they ask you about the most popular app in your country, you have to support it. Why did you say that's the most popular one? Okay. Like, um, do you think it's very helpful? Do you think it is mainly used by a lot of its students, workers? Do you think it is something that should never be gone in the society? Like that, okay? So this will show that you have thought deeply about the topic and have a well developed opinion, okay? All right. Moving on. Okay, hold on just a moment. Okay. Moving on, listen to the questions carefully. Okay, during your exam, you might be very nervous. Um, you might be stuttering as well. You might be anxious, and there's a tendency that you don't know or you don't understand the question already. Okay. So, in this case, you have to compose yourself so that you can understand each other. Okay. Listen carefully to the questions and make sure you understand what is being asked. All right. So, you have to be attentive. You have to look at the examiner. Okay. Don't hesitate to ask the examiner to repeat or clarify the question if necessary. Yes, it's okay to ask the question. All right. It does not affect your score, honestly. Okay. So, what will you say? Something like, I'm sorry, could you please repeat the question? Or you can say, I didn't catch that. Could you repeat the question? But do not say, could you repeat it again? I always hear that a lot. We cannot say repeat it again, okay? You can say, could you say it again? Or you can say, could you repeat the question? But we cannot use the word repeat and again in one sentence, okay? All right. However, um, try not to ask the examiner to repeat the question too many times, okay? Again, too much is not good, right? As this may make it seem like you're not paying attention anymore, okay? Or maybe you are unsure of your English skills. So it's best to listen carefully the first time and only ask for clarification if you really needed it or if you really need it, okay? Yeah. And one more thing is that when you keep on asking the question, it looks like you're not understanding it already, or it looks like most of the words that the examiner is saying is unclear to you. Okay. So it's really important to remember that the examiner wants to hear your best English, and yes, they're very willing to help you. Okay. Because if you understand the question, that means you also know what to say, right? Okay. So they really want to repeat the question for you. Okay. Hmm. Next one is stay within the time limit. We know that IELTS test is actually a timed examination, right? Every part has its own time frame. Like example in part 1 and part 3, it's 4 to 5 minutes. In part 2, it's 3 to 4 minutes. Why 3 to 4 minutes, by the way? You are given 1 minute to prepare plus 2 minutes to talk, right? So that should be 3 minutes only. Well, in part 2, we have what we call as follow-up question. Okay? Not all examiners do this one after your part 2, but a lot of examiners are doing it. Like after you give your answer in part 2, they're going to ask you further questions about your answer. That's not yet a part 3, okay? It's still a part 2, but it's what we call as follow-up question. Especially if your answer is incomplete or they want to know more about your story, they might possibly ask you a further question, okay? Because in part 3 it's not about, in part 3 the questions are not about your answer. It's about the topic. So if they want to ask question about your answer in part 2, they're going to do it during the follow-up questioning. Okay. So be concise. Try to be concise in your responses and avoid going off on tangents or providing unnecessary details. Stick to the main points and use your time wisely. Okay? So you stick to your main point, you stick to the question. Do not go around the bush. Just go directly to your answer and explain or give an example about that. Okay? Pace yourself. What does it mean? So you also have to pace yourself throughout the test. Make sure that you have enough time to answer each question fully. Okay. If you find yourself running out of time, just to wrap up your response quickly and move on to the next question. You can actually feel if you have already said too much. So you have to, calculate the time, okay, and make sure that you're giving enough answers for the question that they ask you. Okay. Lastly, but of course, is also one of the most important one. Okay, be confident and relaxed. All right. I had a student before wherein, because of his nervousness, he was not able to answer the questions that was asked. He was stuttering. He don't know what to say. He doesn't know what to say. And we've been practicing for a lot of time before that. Okay? Because it was his first time and he was affected by the examiner's aura. You know, he said that once he entered the room, the examiner was not smiling, he was just frowning, and it made him feel more nervous and anxious. Okay, so I hope that this won't happen to you. During the examination, you have to enter the room prepared, confident, relaxed. It's okay to be nervous. That's normal, right? We're human. However, your nervousness should not be to the extent that it will affect your speaking skills. For some people, they're nervous in the beginning, but once they start talking, the confidence is already there. Okay? So that's a good one. No problem with that. There are also people wherein they don't feel nervous at all. They actually did it very well, but at the end of the exam, that's where the nervousness comes in. So it also happened that way. Nevertheless, I want you to practice regularly, okay? Because the more you practice speaking, the more confident you will feel. If you know in yourself that you never practice, well, of course, you really don't know what to say during the test because you never prepared at all. You did not even practice, right? So you have to make sure that before the test, you have to go over the questions. We know that the list of the questions are given beforehand, right? So you have to practice answering those ones, prepare your ideas about the specific questions asked. We might not know really exactly what will be the questions that they're going to ask you during your test, but at least you have to have something in your mind before the test. It's like, if you did not prepare before the war, then for sure it will be a failure, right? Okay. So make sure that you are familiar with the format of the test and the types of questions you are likely to be asked. Well, again, in part one is mostly basic questions about yourself, right? About your daily activities, about your hobbies. But sometimes also they might ask some random questions like they will be asking about keys, about your neighbors, about art. They might be asking about other topics like um, the stars, you know, the space. Okay. So even if I say that the questions are about you and about yourself and daily activities, there are still random questions. Okay. Yes. All right. But even if those questions are random, you will still give a shorter answer compared to part three. Okay. Next one, take deep breath. If you feel nervous or anxious during the test, take a few deep breaths to help you relax. Okay? You can also drink water before that. Or we also have what we call as use positive self-talk. So sometimes the most important person who will help you is also yourself, right? You have to talk to yourself that you can do it. Okay? No negativity before the test. Like you have to be optimistic that you can do it, that that the exam is really very expensive. Okay, and you have to do your best or else you're going to pay another examination fee in the future again, right? Okay. All right, thank you. I'm sorry. I keep on drinking water because I'm having colds, honestly. Okay. Next one, or the last one, is be yourself. Don't try to be someone you're not. Be yourself and speak in a natural and conversational tone. Okay. I noticed that some people try to imitate, or they want to imitate the British English, which is also good, right? That's really a good way. That's really a good English. However, if you think that that would make you, if you think that that would make your examination or preparation more complicated, you don't need to. Okay. We have to be natural and just use what we call as neutral English when we are conveying our thoughts. There's no required kind of English that we have to use during the test. You can use any, okay? But the most common one is the neutral English. You can use Aussie English, British, US, it's up to you. But just make sure that, again, the examiner will score you depending on your fluency and coherence, grammar, pronunciation, and vocabulary. And all those four criteria are 25% each. Okay? So that's it. All right. Oh, we still have one. I'm sorry. Yeah, the final one, get feedback. Okay. So practice with a teacher or a friend who can give you feedback on your speaking skills. All right. So ask for feedback on your pronunciation, fluency, grammar, and vocabulary, and work on improving your weaknesses. And make sure that once they give you the feedback, you have to work on it, especially if the feedback that was given is quite negative. You have to work on it. All right, turn your weakness into strengths, right? That is actually part of practicing. All right, another one is that as much as possible, try not to repeat the same error over and over again in order for your improvement to be faster. Okay, so I guess that's it for now. So thank you so much for listening. To those aspirants who's going to have their exam, wishing you all the best on your test. Okay. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your rich content presentation, which can impact our knowledge seeker surely. After your presentation, I hope our knowledge seeker can learn something new, which was our only intention. Learn and grow together, IGP knowledge seeker. Once again, thank you so much, dear ma'am, for your presentation. Now, ma'am, it's time for our question answer session, which is the one more valuable part of our regular webinar. Honorable ma'am, please stay with us. After a short video, we will be back in our session part 2, which is the question answer part. Dear IGP
Thank
knowledge
you.
seeker, please ask your question in the comment box as much as you want to know from our speaker. Thank you. After question answer, we have a business certification and online quiz competition. Dear IGP knowledge seeker, please ask your question in the comment box as much as you want to know from our speaker. Thank you. After question answer, we have a webinar certification and online quiz competition. Dear IGP knowledge seeker, please ask your question in the comment box as much as you want to know from our speaker. Thank you. After question answer, we have a webinar certification and online quiz competition. Dear IGP knowledge seeker, please ask your question in the comment box as much as you want to know from our speaker. Thank you. After question answer, we have a webinar certification and online quiz competition. Ma'am, I think after your wonderful presentation, our participant can understand the topic very clearly. That's why no more questions from our participants. So once again, thank you so much, Honorable Ma'am, for your time in IGP. We have learned a lot from you with your topic. It will add some value to our day-to-day activity along with our academic and professional growth. Honorable Ma'am, hope to see you again with a new topic and a new day. Thank you, ma'am. Take care.
Thank you.
Dear IGP knowledge seeker, it's time for the webinar certification. This is the most attractive and powerful part of our regular webinar. After a short video, we will start our webinar certification. After webinar certification, we have an online quiz competition and quiz certification. IGP knowledge seeker, it's time for the webinar certification. This is the most attractive and powerful part of our regular webinar. After a short video, we will start our webinar certification. After webinar certification, we have an online quiz competition and quiz certification. Today, our some technical problem, we cannot share our certificate code. We provide our certificate code in a short time. Thank you. Today, our some technical problem, we cannot share our certificate code. We provide our certificate code in a short time. Thank you. Dear IGP knowledge seekers, time for the most engaging part of this webinar, which is an online quiz competition, which is a regular webinar activity. Now, time for the online quiz competition. To join the online quiz competition properly, please follow my instruction carefully. Now, time for the online quiz competition. To join the online quiz competition properly, please follow my instruction carefully. Go to www.slido.com and find today's quiz or scan this QR code for direct joining. Quiz code is Global IGP. After a short video, we will start our quiz session. Please join in Slido with the code and the code is global IGP. Please join in Slido with the code and the code is global IGP. Please join in Slido with the code and the code is global IGP. Dear participants, please join in Slido with the code and the code is global IGP. Please join in Slido with the code and the code is global IGP. With 17 people, we are going to start our quiz session right now. Our first question is in IELTS speaking part 2, you have 1 minute to take note and then you should talk for dash minutes. Option 1, 1 to 2, option 2, 2 to 3. Option 1 is the right answer and 61% people are right here. The leaderboard, Alex is holding the first position. Our second question is, which part of the IELTS speaking belongs to both IELTS academic and IELTS general test? Option 1, part 1, option 2, part 3. Option 1 is the right answer. 72% people are right here. The leaderboard, Alex is holding the first position. Our third question is, which is true about TOEFL and IELTS speaking sessions? Option 1, you should answer in American English for TOEFL and British for IELTS. Option 2, we speak to a computer in TOEFL and to a real person in IELTS. Option 2 is the right answer, and 35% people are right here in the leaderboard. Vivian is holding the first position. Our fourth question is, you need reason and consequence in your as speaking. Option 1 true, option 2 false. Option 2 is the right answer, and only 10% people are right here in the leaderboard. Vivian is holding the first position. Our fifth question is, confidence and attitude is tested during IELTS speaking test. Option 1 true, option 2 false. Option 2 false, right answer, and 0% people are right here. Leaderboard, Evelyn is holding the first position. Our sixth question is, you need to complete the IELTS reading, listening, speaking, and written test in the IELTS exam. Option 1 true, option 2 false. Option 1 is the right answer, and 95% people are right here. The leaderboard, Evelyn is holding the first position. Our 67 question is as speaking is usually between and minutes long. Option 1 11 to 40 minutes. Option 2 11 to 40 minutes. Option 1 is the right answer and 62% people are right here. The leaderboard, Alex is holding the first position. Our eighth question of the morning session is there is a speaking session for both IELTS and TOEFL. Option 1 true, option 2 false. Option 1 is the right answer and 67% people are right here. The leaderboard, Alex is holding the first position. Our second last question of the morning session is to embellish and degrees in is acceptable in IELTS speaking. Option 1 false, option 2 true. Option 2 is the right answer and 29% people are right here. The leaderboard, Alex is holding the first position. Our last and final question of the morning session is listening and speaking test, IELTS, academic and general knowledge. Option 1 differ, option 2 the same. Option 1, 29% is right answer. And in the leaderboard, Alex is holding the first position. Congratulations to our all and quiz competition winner top 10. Congratulations again. Slide will take a few minutes for finalizing the result, and after that, we will issue our quiz competition certificate on our official Facebook page and group Institute of Global Professionals. Congratulations to our all and quiz competition winner top 10. Congratulations again. Slide will take a few minutes for finalizing the result, and after that, we will issue our online quiz competence certificate on our official Facebook page and group in Institute of Global Professionals. Congratulations to our online quiz competition winner top 10. Congratulations again. Slide will take a few minutes for finalizing the result, and after that, we will issue our online quiz competence certificate on our official Facebook page and group in Institute of Global Professionals. At the end of our session, we can say, properly feed your skill, never stop learning, cause life never stop teaching us. Be happy and stay safe. See you again and again. We want your participation in every program. If you want to live a happy life, try to a goal, not to people or things. Albert Einstein. Before I say or hit the end like button, again wants to thank all our GP knowledge seekers for your active participation as always. See you again in the next session. Thank you.